Chapter 13. It's not forever. That's what Bobbie told herself as she followed Ben down the eerie subterranean path. She was leaving her village behind, her home, and because they were underground, she wasn't even sure how far they'd gone yet. Would she still see clearing every temple rising above the plain if she were up on ground level right now? Or would they pass the plains already and underneath the forest, or even the distant mountains? Bobbie had no idea, but she promised herself she'd be back just as soon as her brother was cured. Johnny gurgled and growled from behind her as she dragged him along. It was tiring, keeping him close but not too close. She didn't trust Ben to take his lead, though. Johnny was her responsibility. Okay, hold up, said Ben, and he stopped walking to look at his map. If we go any farther in this direction, we'll overshoot our mark. We need to veer east. But the phantoms are still a problem if we don't get some rest first. You packed the bed, right? Bobbie set her bed down, positioning it against the wall and just beneath a torch. She was glad for the light, but also perplexed by it. Somebody had put that torch there, just as somebody had laid the layers. But why? I don't get it, said Bobbie. Aren't you curious about where this rail line goes? Or about who built it? It must serve some purpose. I'm not curious, said Ben, and he set his own bed a little farther down the tunnel. But the overworld is full of strange stuff. I've seen abandoned mine shafts, desert timbers, structures that somebody must have built for some reason. But what what that reason could be is anybody's guess. He sat on his bed without moving any of his armor first. So you can waste brain power making guesses, or you can focus on survival. I highly recommend the latter, because not surviving sounds like a real drag. Better to live in ignorance than to die knowledgeable, said Bobbie. Got it. Is that lesson number 2? That is not what I said, Ben huffed. The only mean that there are things you need to know in order to survive out here, and the purpose of this underground rail isn't one of those things. He pointed at a spot beyond her bed, a good distance from where he sat. Now set down a fence post, tie your brother to it, and get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna be challenging enough without having to worry about phantoms. Bobbie had thought she'd find it difficult to fall asleep, but the opposite was true. The moment she hopped into bed, before she'd even taken off her helmet, she fell into a deep, dreamless slumber. Ben woke her by throwing an egg at her, which Bobbie felt was the definition of a rude awakening. Really? She said. You couldn't gently shake my shoulder or something? I couldn't get any closer, Ben said defensively from a short distance away. He pointed at Johnny, who stood vigilant at the foot of her bed, surrounded by several torches that he had knocked off the wall. He wouldn't let me get anywhere near you, Ben explained. Sweet baby, Bobbie said, patting Johnny's head. Were you guarding me all night? Don't you need to sleep? Johnny growled, and it almost sounded like the purr of a contented cat. I scouted around topside, said Ben. We're near the road that leads into Savannah Town. Bobbie was surprised by that. You left us down here all alone, she said. She asked. Sure, said Ben. You look like you need the sleep. And sweet baby over there was on guard duty. Bobbie rubbed her arms, suddenly feeling a sudden chill. I don't think we should split up, she said. Even if I'd woken up and you weren't there, that seemed to strike a chord of some kind in Ben. His eyes softened, and when he spoke, he sounded unusually solemn. Hey, I won't abandon you like that. I promise. He rubbed the back of his head. But you're right. We should stick together. And I found something that might make that easier. Just keep an open mind about it. Ben seemed suddenly hesitant, and Bobbie found that deeply suspicious. Go on, she said. To her surprise, Ben produced a carved pumpkin from his inventory, hefting it up with both hands. He grinned and said, What do you think? Is it Johnny's size? Chapter 14. Ben felt the carved pumpkin was a marked improvement. Admit it, he said to Bobbie. It suits him. Bobbie frowned. He can tell when you're mocking him. Johnny grumbled, turning from Ben to his sister, and he wobbled slightly. His head was completely enclosed with a pumpkin, which was almost as big as his body, making him a bit unsteady on his feet. The pumpkin's carved smile made the zombie boy appear downright jovial. Who's mocking? Said Ben. It's pragmatic. It's stylish. It's unique. Form and function in a single accessory. He pointed at the sun as it traversed the eastern sky. Or haven't you noticed that your brother, unique among undead monstrosities, has not caught fire in the light of the sun? That's a pretty good perk. Bobbie blinked into the sun. I almost thought you were lying about that. Oh, come on, said Ben. You think I want to see your only brother catch on fire? You want me to answer that truthfully? She asked, putting her hands on her hips. Look, I'm glad this means we can travel by daylight. By daylight, she watched as her brother looked up at the clouds and almost toppled backwards. I can't just, I just can't help wondering if there's a more dignified option here. Well, said Ben, I suppose you could give him your helmet, and you could wear the pumpkin. As he talked, he set 2 blocks of stone down, one on top of the other, and then he placed a lit torch on top. At Bobbie's questioning look, he explained, "I like to leave little mongrels for myself as I travel. If we need to find our way back to the rail tunnel, this should make it a little bit easier to find." Johnny swatted at the torch, knocking it from its perch. "I'll try not to take that personally," said Ben. They traveled a good distance in peace. It was a clear day, with no monsters to be seen, except Johnny, and though Bobbie found it necessary to greet every animal they passed, Ben felt they were making good time. At the at their current pace, they might even make it to Savannah Town before nightfall, but Ben knew better than to count his turtles before they hatched. So he kept his eyes open, scanning the horizon for danger. And he wasn't entirely surprised when he saw a figure on the horizon ahead. Hey, heads up, Ben warned. Someone's coming this way. He drew his sword. Is that really necessary? Asked Bobbie. Third rule of adventuring. You can't win a sword fight if you're holding a sunflower. Sure, said Bobbie, but a sunflower might help us avoid the fight altogether. Better safe than sorry, Ben sighed. In a way, what happened to me? And anyway, what happened to me being the boss? Well, I thought Well, I thought about it some more, said Bobbie. I'll bet you did, Ben groused. And Bobbie continued imperfectly, I realize that I'm paying you. That means technically that you work for me. Eargrow, if either of us is the boss. It's you, Ben said, finishing her thought. He stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. But you're paying me to keep you safe. I can't do that if you don't let me, and if you if you don't mind me being honest with you. This ought to be this ought to be good, said Bobbie. You are alarmingly native. Ben held up a hand to forestall her argument. I don't mean it as an insult. It's sort of charming. But that person on the road ahead of us could be an axe wielding illager, or an adventurer looking to steal our stuff, or a trigger happy Trader Riley, said Bobbie. Sure, said Ben. A trigger happy Trader Riley would be in another example, I guess. No, you goof, said Bobbie. I recognize them. She started running up the path, calling back over her shoulder. They're a merchant. They come through Plaintown sometimes. Johnny, pulled behind in her wake, growled and attempted to bite Ben as he passed. Yeah, good luck biting anything through that helmet. Chomp, chomp. Ben muttered, slow so that Bobbie wouldn't hear it. Ben seized his sword and followed behind them. But he didn't hurry. At this distance, he could see that Bobbie was right. The stranger appeared harmless. They wore a fine garment of blue, accented with a glittering gold trim, with a matching hat and simple sandals. Like Bobbie, the trailer held the lead, but instead of his number 5 symboling, the trailer was pulling along two llamas. The llamas wore colorful carpets and aggrieved expressions, but then llamas always looked a little irate to Ben. Having been on the receiving end of llama spit more than once, he was not particularly fond of the animals. As he caught up, Bobbie was given a tearful, abbreviated account of Plaintown's fate. They're all gone, she said, and the trailer honked and hummed in response. Wearing the pumpkin? That's Johnny. You remember him. He's just a little under the weather. Ben could see Bobbie straining to keep Johnny still. The trailer made more noises, and Bobbie chuckled. His name's Ben. He says he's a hero, but he's sort of more like a mercenary. Hang on, said Ben. Do you understand each other? He pointed at the trailer. They're just making gibberish noises. Bobbie tutted. First of all, rude. Second of all, just because you don't know a language doesn't make it, gibberish. She lifted her chin. It actually sounds quite poetic to me. And it isn't so hard to get the gist if you pay attention. Trailer Riley honked in what might have been agreement or perhaps a very short poem. I'll take your word for it, said Ben. Bobbie turned back to Riley. He said it's very nice to make your acquaintance. Yes, he's very polite for a mercenary. While Bobbie and Riley continued the conversation, Ben watched Riley's llamas. They appeared especially aggravated, stabbing and bleating. They eyed Johnny weirdly. Johnny, for his part, had grown unusually still. It was hard to know where his gaze was pointed while he wore the pumpkin. But Ben had a feeling he knew just what had Johnny's attention. Bobbie, said Ben. Just a minute, Ben, she said, her focus remaining on the trailer. That's lovely. How much are you selling it for? Bobbie rooted around in her inventory, letting her guard down. It was just for 1 second, but a second was all it took Johnny pulled free from her grasp, lunging at the nearest llama, who bleated in alarm. It was absolute chaos. Johnny, still practically restrained by the helmet, couldn't eat the animals, but he swiped at them, tearing into them with his claws. Bobbie shouted for him to stop. The llamas retaliated with copious amount of spit, and Trader Riley, reasonably enough, in Ben's opinion, chugged a poison of incivility and vengeance from view. Stop laughing and help me, said Bobbie. Ben hadn't even realized he'd been laughing, but she was right. By the time he reached her side, she had the lead in her hand again, and was straining to pull Johnny off of llama number one. Llama number two had taken off running for the hills. Sorry, sorry, Ben said, still chuckling a bit. But I would have been able to react faster if I had my sword drawn and ready like I wanted. And who were you going to stab in this scenario? Bobbie asked sharply, finally pulling her brother away. The llama spat at Johnny one more time before turning tail and running. A sword doesn't solve everything, Bobbie continued. It doesn't solve most things. It could have solved that llama's attitude problem, Ben countered. They're all like that. My friend Logan used to run up and slap them. Then he'd hide so they'd spit on me. He sounds like a terrible friend, said Bobbie, exhaling as Johnny gave up on pursuing the animals. The lead went slack as he finally settled down. What? No, said Ben. It was a joke, a game, he chuckled again, but this time it was a little forced. We were both in on it. If you say so, said Bobbie, but her attention was elsewhere. Johnny, what am I going to do with you? Here, look at this. She produced a seashell from her inventory, a nautilus shell, and waved it at her brother. Johnny remained uninterested, but it caught Ben's eye. Where did you get that? He asked. I just bought it from Riley, said Bobbie. It only cost 5 emeralds. Ben gasped. You spent 5 emeralds on that? He said. Sure, Bobbie frowned. Why not? It's pretty. I've never seen. It's useless, said Ben. Ben said, we need armor. We need real weapons. My sword is a dull hunk of stone. He pulled his sword out and waved it around to prove his point. That trader obviously had a potion of invisibility. You still have bought that. They won't They won't offer any potions for sale, Bobbie said. It was either this nautilus shell or a bucket of fish, which you'd have known if you bothered to interact with Riley at all instead of giving those llamas the stink eye for the last 5 minutes. Ugh, fine, said Ben, throwing up his hands. Just maybe don't spend any more emeralds without talking to me first. At least I know what they're worth. You can do whatever you want with the emeralds, said Bobbie. Once you've earned them by completing your part of the bargain. She cast a hopeless look at Johnny. We can't keep going on like this. I have to kill my brother. I know, said Ben, shashing. His temper evaporated at the sound of desperation in her voice. Come on, Savannahton is that way, and the path looks clear. He put his sword away, hoping that would put Bobbie more at ease. If he hadn't noticed the column of smoke snaking above the horizon, he might have kept it at the ready. Chapter 15. What happened here? Asked Ben, and Bobbie knew the answer. She knew, and she wished she didn't. It was a zombie siege, she said. Bobbie took in the scene. It was a village much like hers, except the building's materials were different. The wood was a more vibrant red and terracotta where Plaintown had used stone, but the detail that stood out immediately to Bobbie was the lack of doors. The homes hadn't been built that way. Something had smashed through them. Ben looked skeptical. Are you sure? He asked. I mean, Another zombie disease? What are the odds? Could it be the same group of zombies? Bobbie asked. Woman across the land, hitting one village after another. No way, said Ben. He looked up at the moon. They couldn't make it here in a single night. And they burned up in the sun, remember? Johnny found a way around that problem, said Bobbie, and she inclined her head toward her brother, who was tied to his post. She removed his helmet when the sun had gone down. She couldn't shake the feeling that he found it uncomfortable, even if Ben insisted Johnny had shown no obvious signs of discomfort. Well, technically, I found a way around it, Ben pointed out. I don't think a pack of roving zombies is going to figure out the same trick. They're nowhere near smart enough. He turned to Johnny. No offense, champ. Johnny growled, straining at his lead. Ben leaned over and booped his nose. Bobbie turned in a slow circle, taking in the damage. There might have been survivors. She fervently hoped there had been. But if so, they seemed to have fled. She turned to Ben. Do you think they left anything useful lying around here? Oh ho, said Ben in his most obnoxious tone of voice. Isn't that interesting? Suddenly, it's okay to take other people's things. Bobbie scowled. It's not like that. Well, the moral line is looking a little hazy, is all. Is all I'm saying. He smiled. Come on, I'm teasing. Let's go shopping. Ben led the way to the nearest house, practically skipping. He seemed excessively pleased that Bobbie was going along with his routine. Bobbie, for her part, decided she couldn't afford to care. If the villagers had left something behind that could keep them alive or otherwise help her brother, then she was willing to bend her own moral code. Ben hopped through an open doorway as Bobbie watched. She saw a sudden violent change come over him, even from behind. Without a view of his face, it was unmistakable. His elevation was gone in an instant, and a trembling thrill of terror leaped through him nearly as soon as he stepped through an open doorway. Oh no, he cried. Mercy, mercy, oh help. Bobbie went forward, practically leaping through the doorway, but when she came to a sudden halt, it wasn't fear or hesitation that held her rooted to the floor. It was a tangled mess of sticky webbing. She was in it up to her waist, and it clung to her fiercely. She could still move, but just barely. And at tremendous effort, where did this come from? She asked. Sputtered. Spider! Ben pointed, directing Bobbie's eyes to a darkened corner of the room. He was right. A large spider crouched in the corner, its black body almost impossible to see in the shadows, but its glittering eyes shone in the dark as it considered what it had caught in its web. It's okay, said Bobbie. I don't think it's hostile. Ignoring her entirely, Ben drew a bow and fired an arrow at the spider. Well, now it's hostile, said Bobbie. Ben shot off 2 more arrows, but his aim was erratic, and the spider closed the distance quickly, scurrying unimpeded over the webs. As it neared striking distance, Bobbie thought Ben would draw his sword. Instead, he curled up into a ball. What are you doing? Bobbie demanded, and when Ben only whimpered, she added, What should I do? Help, was all Ben said. Oh, this is ridiculous, said Bobbie, and she drew her sword, swiftly cutting the web away from her body. Clearing a small area, she stepped forward and stabbed out with the sword, slaying the spider with 2 hits. Wait. You can come out now, Bobbie said, cutting the weapon away from Ben's crouching form. It's gone? Ben asked, keeping his eye clenched tight. It's gone, Bobbie confirmed, and it was way less dangerous than those phantoms you tried to fight. What just happened? I don't like bugs, Ben said plainly. Bobbie thought he might elaborate, but he only dusted himself off and stepped out into the night. Bobbie scooped up several spider eye before following him. She knew they were she knew they were useful in potions. After a thorough inventory of the abandoned village, Ben and Bobbie found precious little of use. They managed to collect a few loaves of bread, some rotten flesh, and a gently used shield. Ben threw it at the sight. The cleric, of course, was gone, and they hadn't left behind a single potion. Ben lingered in the cartographer's home. It was similar to the one in Plaintown, but the large map upon its wall covered a different area. Bobbie noticed that Ben seemed especially preoccupied with a muddy brown region that she assumed had to be some sort of swamp. What is it? She asked him. It's nothing. She It's nothing, he said. Then he shook his head as if to clear it. Come on, let's get your brother and choose a house to stay in for the night. I'll replace the door. They stepped outside, and Bobbie was overwhelmed by a sense of hopelessness. It didn't matter which house they chose, they were all the same, all husks, emptied of everything that had given them purpose. That was as true for Savannahtown as it was for Plaintown. You may as well just leave us here, said Bobbie. She sat right down in the dirt. Huh? Said Ben. Leave you here in Savannahtown? He made a show of looking around. Cute place, but there was not much of a nightlife. I know this wasn't the deal, said Bobbie. The deal was that you'd bring us here and take us back again. But what's the difference? Why even go back? There isn't anything for us there. She wheeled around in her inventory, pulling out a stack of emeralds. Here, she said, putting them on the ground between them. I think that should cover it. Ben stepped toward the emeralds, but he stopped short. Hold on, said Ben. Was that what we agreed to? Are you sure? Bobbie looked at him. Isn't that enough? She asked. It's all I have. It's enough, said Ben. He scratched his head comically. But I thought our deal was that I take you back home after we figured out a cure. We haven't done that yet. Wait, let me check. He went over to Johnny, extended a hand toward her brother. Johnny attempted to bite him, but Ben was ready for that and too quick, pulling away leaving Johnny's teeth to clack close on empty air. Ben went back to her. He's still a zombie, he reported. So, we're not finished yet. Bobbie sussed Ben's face, half expecting this to be a prank of some kind. Are you serious? She asked. I'm pretty sure. I thought. Listen, don't go getting all weepy on me, said Ben. This is just business. Suppose it got around that I took your emeralds and didn't deliver on my end. He clucked his tongue, shook his head. That sort of negative review can follow a guy around for ages. Bobbie resisted the urge to leap up from the dirt and hug him. He clearly wanted to maintain the illusion that this was no big deal. But Bobbie knew what he was doing for her, and she was grateful. I appreciate your professionalism, she said, rubbing at her eyes. But unless you know where to find another cleric, I'm not sure where we go from here. Don't know where to find a cleric, said Ben, but I might be able to get us the next best thing. I noticed a detail on the map back there. He shook his head, and this might be a terrible idea, but it's the only one I've got. What? Asked Bobbie. What's the idea? Well, said Ben, have you met a witch before?